Welcome to Season 4 of UX Banter, your portal to insightful conversations with design illuminaries. We are back with even more engaging discussions with design leaders, delving into their experiences and inspirations. Get ready for fresh insights as we explore the latest trends and challenges in the industry. With me, your host, Dushyant Kanungo.
This podcast is presented by Galaxy UX Studio and powered by Galaxy Weblinks, an Inc. 5000 organization.
Hello, everyone. Today, I'm delighted to introduce a seasoned expert known for making technology user friendly and engaging. With over 2 decades of experience leading UX teams and crafting innovative user experiences across diverse domains, he is recognized for enhancing user satisfaction through intuitive and effective design solution. Please join me in welcoming Senior Product Manager at Imprivata, Matthew Belge.
Imprivata, and
Provada.
thank you for the very nice welcome. You embarrassed me with with your compliments. Thank you.
So, how the journey has been like? I mean, whenever somebody talks about being in the industry for more than 25, 20 years, it feels like that we are talking about, or, about an era that is far, far back in time when technology was just starting out. So, how was your journey and what, the momentum shifts that you have experienced and seen during the period?
Well, you're right. When I finished my college career, as far as I know, career in UX did not exist. The closest thing might have been something like human factors, which I didn't know even existed back then. And human factors people were doing things like designing airplane cockpits. So to tell you a little bit about my journey, and I would say to sort of jump ahead and tell what is the theme. The theme has always been that I just followed my interests. I had no idea when I went to college that I was eventually going to end up as a UX designer or product designer. But I just followed my interests, and each time I made a leap, I was fortunate in that it worked out well for me. So to tell the story, I started out entering college as an electrical engineer, and I graduated with a degree in electrical engineering. And I did that because I was very good at math, and I was told that electrical engineering was the one discipline that was most mathematically oriented. But I was also really interested in art, and in college I took classes in art, and I volunteered with some local theater companies because I loved theater. And I ended up getting a job in Boston working for a computer company that made what's called mini computers. These are computers that are the size of refrigerators. Um, and I was an engineer working on the design of those. When I moved to Boston, I didn't know anyone in Boston. And so I started trying to find ways to, make friends. And one of the things I did was I started volunteering for some local theater companies. And through that, I started meeting artists and other people in the world of art. And I was just absolutely fascinated. By now, we're talking about the late 1970s. Personal computers were starting to become available, and artists were becoming interested in technology and in using technology. And so I just volunteered to help them. I was like, this is really interesting. I want to do this. And, there was no money. It was just a volunteer situation. But I became so fascinated by the way that artists think. It was so different than the way engineers think that eventually I decided that I wanted to go to art school myself. And so I talked my way into Massachusetts College of Art in Boston, enrolled as a graduate student, and eventually ended up making lighting installations, environments with light. And towards the end of my time there, I started using computers to help control those lights. And my goal was to actually make a living as an artist doing lighting installations, but that turned out to be just about impossible. I don't know if it's possible now, but back then there was just so little money. But I also started getting work as a software developer because along the way I'd learned to write computer programs since I was working with computers all the time. And little by little, people started asking me to do the user interface part of it. Is now the Macintosh was becoming on the scene and people were paying attention to things like icons and visible elements. And because they knew I had this art background, they thought, well, you're the art guy. Why don't you do the user interface? So I started doing that. I ended up really liking it and eventually ended up in a job where I was hired as a coder, as a programmer, but my boss asked me if I would lead all the user experience because we had like 15 engineers creating user interfaces and we needed somebody to coordinate all of it. And I remember thinking, is this really a job? Like, what happens if it doesn't work out? Like, I've made my living coding and being an engineer. And I really was worried that, there wouldn't be any future for me, but I just thought it was interesting. I didn't know anybody who was doing anything like this at the time, but I said yes. And so for the next 2 years, this company was working on all kinds of things from Unix platforms to Macintosh to PC. So I had to learn all these different, user interface platforms. I ended up getting, rather good at it because the developers were just firing questions at me left and right. And then eventually I left that company and I ended up going to a place where I was allowed to be a full-time user experience designer. That was for a company called Sun Microsystems. And I was very fortunate in that the people who were working there included a number of the people who'd been from Apple, like some of the people who worked on the Lisa, which was the predecessor to the Macintosh, and people who had worked on the Macintosh were in that same group. And I learned a lot of user experience from them, including things like doing user research and usability testing. And so from there, I ended up progressing to working for myself. That company, I ended up leaving that company, Sun Microsystems, and went out on my own. And for about 15 years or so, I worked as an individual user experience consultant. I was one of the first in the Boston area, as far as I know, to be an independent consultant doing that kind of work. And I've been doing it ever since. So now after 15 years of doing independent consulting, I just grew tired of it for a number of reasons. But I ended up working now for a really great company called Imprivata. Imprivata makes software that controls access to important systems like healthcare systems and makes it very easy for users who are things like doctors and nurses to quickly get access to the medical information that they need. And so I'm very happy doing that work now.
Wow, what a journey. Now, with this transformation that you have seen with everything without computers, everything is done manually to now the entire world is now can hung upside down like it happened last week with Microsoft and
Right.
the other company. Now see
Yeah.
here, the Microsoft says it wasn't their fault, but because they are the bigger known name, they are the ones who are getting blamed for it. CrowdStrike, I think, was the other company. So don't you think that the world was kept hostage at a time where the UX or the experience or the technology that was mission critical? I mean, you work for an organization which has this emergency UX situations where you are designing for medical life and death situations, and you're also doing, say, identity management. I think that was the primary part in terms for verification of who is getting on the flight to if the patient needs help immediately. So, what do you think that dependence has led us to, and what do you think is going to happen if things go wrong again?
Well, it's a very profound question. First of all, I would say that I think it's improper to blame either CrowdStrike or Microsoft. I don't think they are to blame. The problem there is that these are ubiquitous systems. CrowdStrike is extremely successful. They have, I'm guessing, tens of millions of computers that they cover, and Microsoft even more than that. And it was a human error, nothing vicious as far as I can tell. I don't pretend to have all the details.
Absolutely.
But where UX comes into play, of course, is that whole idea of human error. I mean, it's one of the things that we as user experience designers think about a lot. It's what we're supposed to do to help prevent human error, to think about what it is. And again, I am not blaming neither Microsoft nor CrowdStrike when I talk about this. But what
And
I'm
not
saying is,
neither this show or my organization, we are
right,
not blaming
nor was I
either.
implying that you were. I just wanted to make it very clear. But again, it is the responsibility of UX people to do this kind of work. And I was having a conversation with a colleague over the weekend about this. And we're saying, we like to think of our job as important, but that I mean the user experience. And yet at times we're made to feel unimportant because of various processes that go on, engineering schedules and budgets and so forth. And then a moment like this happens, this sad situation that's going on with these computers that need to be rebooted with, and it reminds us as user experience designers just how important the stuff we do is. And I don't mean to have a sense of self-aggrandizement here, but these systems now control virtually everything, electrical systems, hospitals, communications. And somewhere in that process are user experience designers. And it just makes me feel actually proud to be a part of this and to realize how important what we're doing is. And there is going to be human error. And no matter how hard a job, how hard we work or how good a job we do, and same thing for the engineers and the companies in these places. But the best that we can do is to try to anticipate them. I heard over the weekend, for example, that hospitals that were affected by this bug, they all have procedures in place. If they have to, they go literally to writing things down on paper. And so thinking through, what would happen in these catastrophic situations and making sure that you have a good contingency plan is part of the user experience. And again, I think it emphasizes how important the work that we do is. Hopefully things go right most of the times, and when they do, you don't notice them. You only notice them when things go wrong. Someone once said that you don't really notice good user interfaces, you only notice bad ones. And I guess this is a good example of that.
Absolutely, because the only time we are talking about it because something has gone wrong. Otherwise, I think air travel and the unified systems which are connecting these big cloud operations like booking a hotel in Cincinnati, sitting in India, is possible because of these systems exist, and you can actually plan a world tour like that. I mean, before this, I'm actually not sure how people actually book tickets because I never did it offline. It was always online. I never flew in, before the internet. So for me, it's still a question. I've seen people carrying those big booklets, but how would they be sure that they are going to get a ticket of the flight? I have no idea. So
It's true. It's become so ubiquitous that we don't even remember, what. So to answer your question, maybe you haven't. You used to call someone on the telephone. You would call the airline themselves, and they would send you paper tickets in the mail. And it took a lot longer. You were not booking a flight in the morning that you were leaving in the afternoon. That was very, very rare occurrence. And if it was considered almost an emergency. Now it's, completely common.
you can actually book the tickets on your way to the airport.
Right.
And especially with the hotels and such, you can actually, before that, you would just keep your eyes peeled to find a motel around the road. But now you know where you're going to stay for the night and the food that you want to eat. So with this regards, I mean, what you do is, again, it was something that was considered an emergency of sort in terms of making a decision in a situation where the doctors or the staff is making a call that how to save a patient's life. You work on medical information systems. So how it is integrated into the security systems and the identity management that you do.
So what I work on is actually the identity management part of it. And to clarify what that means for people who don't know, that means doctors, nurses, let's call them clinicians to sort of a general term, they need access to medical information systems to treat their patients. I do not work on those. I work on access to those. And many of these large organizations, they have multiple systems that they need to access, and they need to access them very quickly, and particularly because they're seeing, who knows, 10, 20, 30 patients in a day and accessing the system over and over and over again. So this particular thing that I work on is called single sign-on. And what it's supposed to do is coordinate all those systems so that as easy as tapping their employee badge to a badge reader, they instantaneously get access to all of the systems that they need access to. How do we do that? Well, there's a lot of technology behind it, and I don't take credit at all for the technology. But on the user experience side, we actually go to the hospitals, we observe them, we talk to doctors, we talk to clinicians, there's a very large hospital support team that just does, that just does the technology side of things. So we talk to and work with all of them. We form partnerships with them to understand how they do their work. And we do things like rather complex flow diagrams to understand where in the process a certain glitch might happen and what we might do, to work around that glitch. I'm not saying that it's flawless, but it does work much better than what they had before. What they had before was they'd walk up to a computer and have to type in a password or something like that 5 or 6 times to get access to 5 or 6 different, medical information systems. With regard to the life and death side of things, for the most part, it works. That is, they get into the systems they need to, but the hospitals also put in place protocols in case they can't get in. There are all kinds of backup systems that that can be taken, including literally reverting to paper when they need to. But I would say that, as a general rule, it works quite well. And there are the true emergency where the medical information system is just not working is extremely rare.
I think sometimes, just knowing the domain, I mean, it fits a bit different. I heard that the NHS systems were affected by the meltdown that we just were talking about. And I
Right.
learned quite late in my life that the nurses' watches, which they wear on their clothes, it's upside down. So they don't wear it on their wrist because there is a chance that it gets lost or comes in the way or may cause infection. So it is upside down on their chest. I mean, I was new to that information. So they just need to do like pick it up with their wrist and then they can actually see what time it is. So rather than having it on the wrist, they can just, bend their wrist and see the time. And it was the moment of realizing that they must have done some sort of, it's a simple UX, but having an upside down digital watch and
Right.
it's not analog. So just to know that how much time has gone. And I found that fascinating when I looking into the simplest way of changing the entire experience of the individual and the context of it and the contextuality in which the solution is required was, I think it was quite remarkable.
Well, and I think what you're speaking to, if I may generalize, is the ingenuity of people in pressured situations. And we as UX can learn from those people. I didn't know actually about the upside down watch. I haven't seen that. I take your word for it. But it is true if you study and do things like follow them around and watch them do their work, you'll learn things that it would never have occurred to me, for example, that somebody would have their watch upside down. And there are all kinds of other things that happen when you do those observations that wouldn't have occurred to you. But again, people are absolutely ingenious. And when they're in pressure cooker situations, they're even more ingenious and the things they come up with. And I think, again, our role as user experience designers is to understand that I'm never going to be a doctor, I'm never going to be a nurse, I'm never going to have that level of expertise. But the more I can understand how they work, how they like to think about doing their work, what are the difficulties and pressures in doing their work, the more we can design things to alleviate that and to make it better for them. And that's true not just for medical systems, but for just about any user discipline that we might get involved with.
Absolutely. And with that, let me go back to my diary where I have some questions
Sure.
with the rapid fire ones that I'm going to ask you. The
Okay.
first question is your favorite music.
My favorite music?
Mhm.
I would say jazz, and if I had to pick one person, it'd be close call between John Coltrane and Miles Davis. Probably Miles Davis. Okay.
The food that you can cook.
Food that I can cook. I cook a wide range of food. Um, I'm
Best
gonna
one.
go. I'm gonna go with French.
French, like the whole cuisine.
Well, I thought you meant a style of cooking. Um, yes.
All right. I mean, that's delicious. It sounds very delicious. I think personally, when you are in France, I think half the time that I get confused by is what to order because it sounds all fascinating, but I'm not sure what is going to be served. And because
I
coming
have that
from
challenge too. I don't speak French very well. And of course, there are all kinds of colloquialisms. But I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago, I learned about what was then called Nouvelle French cooking. And
Mhm.
Nouvelle French cooking is essentially taking inspiration from Asian cooking methods and combining it with French cooking methods. The core of it all is to start with creating a very good stock from bones, whether it's chicken bones or vegetables or beef or whatever, and you cook it down to a very concentrated state, and that becomes the basis for the flavors that you're going to add with whatever other thing you're making, whether again it's chicken or duck or steak or etc. So I like that. I don't do it often because it is very labor intensive and time intensive. But if you're asking me what's my favorite, that's the one when I have the time to do it.
Cool. Window or aisle seat.
Oh, definitely aisle. I'm tall, and if I can stick my legs out into the aisle, I try to do that.
Your favorite holiday destination.
Favorite holiday destination? Wow, there's so many. I'll just say Paris. If I just pick one, Paris.
Books or movies?
Ooh, books.
Your favorite one?
My favorite book? Oh my God, there's so many. Um, all right, it's going to be a very obscure one, but I'll mention it. Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts.
Set Speaks.
Seth, Seth, it's a man's name. Seth Speaks by Jane Roberts.
All right. Any design book that you can recommend?
Oh boy, there's so many good ones. The classic, of course, is The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. I like that one very much. But I'll mention a very different one. There's a choreographer named Twyla Tharp. She's a fabulous choreographer, and I have the book right here. It's called The Creative Habit, and
Mhm.
the subject of the creative habit is how to be very effective as a creative person, how to organize your life essentially, so that your creativity is comes comes forward as best as possible. And she's wonderful in describing both some of her successes and some of her failures. So I recommend that book. It's good for anyone, and not just necessarily user experience designers, but anyone involved in creative work.
And I think on the same path where it is not just a UX book that I want to share, which is called Beautiful Evidence by Edward Tuft.
Edward Tufte, yes, great book. Yeah, I'm a
So
big fan of Tufte's work.
he doesn't talk about the generic design as in that this is the medium that we are handling, but just design in general, the aesthetics of it. So if you ever had a superpower, what would it be?
Oh my God. I think it would be to manipulate time so that I could go forward or backward in time, or do things backwards in time or forwards in time.
That's pretty neat. People want to fly though. Lots.
I certainly would love that. And I suppose, like many people, I've had dreams where I could fly. And usually in those dreams, it's like, oh, yeah, I know I could fly. Of course I can fly. It's like, and then I wake up and I'm like, oh, yeah, no, I can't fly.
So seeing the tech evolution from the late 70s, early 70s to right now, what do you think it is going to be, say, in 15 to 20 years time?
It's so hard to predict, but there are two big influences that are, going to have an impact on this. One is, of course, artificial intelligence, and the other is virtual reality. I was just watching a really wonderful YouTube video about what should the paradigm be when we move to virtual reality. And I think a lot of the problems are really unsolved there. And with regard to artificial intelligence, I think like many people, I feel scared a little bit when I think about artificial intelligence, because it has the power to do things, we think at least, it has the power to do things that will replace humans or make decisions that humans are used to making. And what I hope is that we will be smart enough to use artificial intelligence like we use a bicycle. That is, it's something that we ride and we control, and it helps us go faster, but it's not something that takes over or has, or controls us. And with regard to the future of user experience, if you had asked me to predict 20 years ago what it would have been, I don't think I would have come up with the internet. That in the year 2000 just kind of exploded. I was working on the internet in the early 90s, but I was not smart enough to see that someday this was going to affect the whole world. There were other people who were that smart. So it's hard for me to predict, what we'll be doing 15 years from now. But I suspect it will have more to do with virtual reality and coming up with new paradigms that extend things like the desktop metaphor and so forth. Um, the key concept is that humans, whenever a new technology comes along, we borrow from the previous technologies. For a while, the car was called the horseless carriage. We didn't know what a car was, but we knew what a horse was, right? And now we don't know necessarily what the inside of a computer really is, but we know what a desktop is, and so we work with that. So I believe that virtual reality will start out using the metaphors and systems from the previous generations, and little by little it will evolve into its own thing, where as we as humans get more and more comfortable with it.
So back in 97, 98, I dreamt that like the commentary on the radio that you get for a game of cricket, if there was a way to have a portable television where I can, watch the cricket match in my bed or on the go, and that would have been fantastic. And that is, it was just like ridiculous notion that something like that could happen. And
Right.
now we have it. So
Exactly. It is this the era that we live in. Things are just going so fast, and I don't mean that in a bad way. It's exciting. I'm really happy to be in the user experience design field because of that. Because despite all of our complaints and our difficulties and whatever, we are at the point of influence. We, as user experience designers, are the ones who can help determine whether these things are truly beneficial to people. It's up to us to speak out. It's up to us to design systems that do a good job of doing that. And absolutely, being able to watch a cricket game in your bedroom at 3 o'clock in the morning, if that's what you want to do, I think is a really great thing, along with all the other, much more serious benefits. It should be both. It should be both the pleasurable side of things that just enhance our lives and make it more fun, and the really serious stuff that, really needs to get done as well.
now we are at a stage that we definitely would like a recommendation or word of advice to anybody who is now looking into technology, just entering, because they have a very different landscape in front of them. And to be looking at really closely, I think there is about only first generation who is about to retire in next 5 to 5, 6, 8 years, because we never seen the tech business, ending at the other end of the spectrum. And now there are people who are jumping into the foray of taking technology for granted. What would be the career advice that you would like to give to them?
Well, I know it's going to sound self-serving because it's what I did, but I do think it's really good advice. And that is to follow your passions and your interests. I did not have any idea that I'd be doing user experience design. If I was to keep working for another 30 years, which I won't, I have no idea where my career would go, but I'm guessing it's probably going to go beyond user experience design to something else. However, the things I did along the way, studying art, studying engineering, working, volunteering with artists, learning about music, all these things, they fed into what I'm doing. And I never did it with the idea that this was a good career or that I could make money or things like that. It had to do with just following what I thought was interesting. I went into engineering because I was good at math and I liked math, and I thought, let's see where this goes. So my best advice is find the things that you're really interested in and you're passionate about. You don't have to be able to see the future, just be able to see the next few steps. And as you see those next few steps and opportunities open up or new ideas come to you or new things that look interesting, pursue those as well. And little by little, a pattern will emerge and a hopefully happy and successful career will come as a result of it.
That is really great piece of advice, and I think it is not just for anybody who is just starting out, but even I would like to take a leaf out of that, and we'll see that where things are and things go, because evolution is essential and it is part of the DNA of the careers that we are all on. And anybody
Right.
who is listening would understand that they must have started with something and now they're doing something else. Because as a career, there was quite recently the formal path of education has been established. Otherwise, most of us are self-taught with collecting pieces from other bits of education that we have received, be it engineering, psychology, architecture, graphic design, and putting things together. That's what makes a UX designer.
Very true. I'm sure you're aware, Steve Jobs gave a talk where he talked about he took a class in calligraphy just because he was interested. There didn't seem to be any practical value in taking a class in calligraphy other than it was interesting to him. And then some years later, when he was working at Apple, and the idea of fonts and designing typefaces suddenly became possible through the technology, and all that stuff that he had done with calligraphy suddenly became relevant. And again, that's just a great example of pursuing a passion. And then who knows, somewhere in the future, there turns out to be an opportunity for it.
Absolutely. So, anybody who wishes to get in touch with Matt and would like to know more on his, get an advice or seek words of wisdom, vision, the word, logic. Of course. And so visionlogic.com is the website. It is there in the description and also shown on the screen. That would be the best way to get in touch with him. And I hope that we get to talk more, Matt, on the topic and the subject. But thank you very much to coming on to our show. I would definitely would look forward to continue this conversation maybe in another season's episode and get more advice from you for our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I would just say in closing that I am very proud to be a part of this group of people who call ourselves user experience designers. We do really important things. We do them in ways that are really not obvious until you actually see the solution, then it looks obvious. But as we know, it was not obvious until we got to that point. And I want to say I'm really proud of all of us and proud of you for doing this work and to keep it up because it is really important.
And thank you very much once again. And to all the listeners, thank you for joining our show. And please ensure that you stay tuned for next week's episode. We will get more information and more discussion on the same path. Thank you so much.